They thought they could steal my family's bridge with fake maps and bigger trucks. They didn't expect spike traps, a viral crash, and a courtroom war that would cost them millions. This isn't just a fight for land. It's a war for legacy. And I don't lose on my own damn bridge. I've always known the value of land, not in the real estate appreciation sense, but in the way a man knows the calluses on his own hands. My great-grandfather built this bridge over the Little Fox River more than 100 years ago. He felled the timber himself, laid the steel by hand with a crew of Civil War veterans and drunken mules, or so the family legend goes. That bridge has been the artery connecting our land to the rest of the world since before this county even had a planning department. And now, apparently, some HOA thinks they can just claim it like it's an abandoned couch on Craigslist. My name's Jackson Harper. I'm 41, a structural engineer by trade and a property owner by bloodline. I live out in Montana, just far enough outside city limits to avoid the noise, but close enough to the grid that fiber internet and lawsuits still reach my mailbox. My property covers close to 100 acres of forest, fields, and riverfront. The bridge, it's a private structure, rebuilt and reinforced by me personally 10 years ago. I have permits, receipts, historical surveys, engineering diagrams, and about 6 pounds of notarized paperwork saying the same thing. This bridge is mine. The trouble began about 2 months ago when I started seeing cement trucks cross my bridge. Not just one or two, dozens over the course of a few weeks. Big boys, 8-wheel, fully loaded concrete mammoths groaning across the timber like they were born to destroy it. At first I thought it was a mistake. I figured maybe a construction company got the wrong GPS coordinates. Then I realized they weren't just crossing my bridge, they were doing it daily, routinely, confidently. I stopped one of the trucks one afternoon, stood dead center in front of it as it crept toward my land like a slow-moving whale. Driver rolled his window down and said, "You with Fox River HOA?" I blinked. "No. Are you?" He smirked, nodded toward a clipboard. "This delivery's for Fox River Community Development. They told us to use this route." That's how I learned that a new homeowners association had sprung up on the other side of the river. Some overfunded, under-supervised community built on former ranch land I refused to sell years ago. I never thought they'd be dumb enough, or arrogant enough, to try and co-opt my bridge. The next day I received a letter. Thick envelope, embossed seal, letterhead that smelled like lavender and litigation. The Fox River Community HOA was officially informing me that, per their interpretation of recent municipal development plans, the bridge had become functionally integrated into community infrastructure, and thus qualified as a shared access route under temporary servitude. It was the legal equivalent of someone pissing on your porch and calling it a rainstorm. I sent back my own letter, short, direct, full of attachments. I included my family's land deeds, surveyor maps from 1923, even photos of my great-grandfather standing in front of the original bridge holding a damn shotgun. I CC'd the county assessor, land registrar, and 2 local reporters. I figured that'd shut it down. It didn't. A week later, more trucks came. Not just cement this time, dump trucks, rebar haulers, a goddamn mobile crane. They treated the bridge like it was a freeway ramp. I put up signs. Private bridge, no trespassing, not for commercial use. 2 days later, someone spray-painted them with HOA logos. Another truck broke off a railing. No apology, no repairs. It wasn't just about wear and tear. That bridge was my family's legacy, and they were violating it with the enthusiasm of drunk frat boys at a borrowed Airbnb. I climbed under the bridge one evening and noticed fresh cracks forming along one of the main steel beams I installed during the last renovation. Cracks. From weight stress, not weathering. I started sleeping badly. My dog, a pit lab mix named Grover, began growling every time a truck passed in the morning. I called the HOA's listed number, got voicemail, left a message, no callback. Then, out of nowhere, an SUV pulled up in my driveway one Saturday morning. A woman stepped out, early 50s blazer, tight blonde bun, clipboard in hand. I knew a Karen when I saw one. "Mr. Harper," she said like I was her assistant who just spilled coffee. "I'm Karen Whitfield, president of the Fox River HOA. We need to talk about the bridge." "We do," I replied, "specifically about how your people keep illegally using it." She smiled with all the warmth of a tax audit. "It's a gray area, Mr. Harper. According to our consultants, the bridge now serves a community purpose. You may want to consider partnering with us. We're willing to be reasonable." Reasonable would be not using it at all. "You're standing in the way of community growth." "No," I said. "I'm standing on private property." Her eyes narrowed. "I think you'll find we have paperwork that says otherwise." "Show it to the judge," I replied and walked away. I could feel her watching me as I went back inside. I didn't slam the door, but I wanted to. I didn't grab a whiskey, but I considered it. I just sat down at my kitchen table, stared out the window at that damn bridge, and realized something important. This wasn't just about property lines anymore. A week after that unpleasant driveway conversation, I got an email from Karen herself. It was polite, corporate, and so saturated with fake civility it could have been bottled as perfume. "Mr. Harper, perhaps we could discuss a mutually beneficial solution over lunch. We at the HOA would rather resolve this privately and amicably." I should have deleted it. Instead, I replied, "Fine. Noon. O'Malley's Steakhouse. You're paying." When she walked into O'Malley's, she looked like she was about to negotiate a merger, not talk about a century-old bridge. She greeted me with that tight TV anchor smile again, the kind that says, "I'm about to screw you, but nicely." "Mr. Harper," she said, sliding into the booth, "thank you for meeting with me. I know this has been stressful." "Stressful is one word for it," I said. "Illegal trespassing is another." Her smile didn't waver. "You have to understand, Fox River is growing fast. The bridge is the only direct connection for our new development. It's already being used by dozens of contractors and suppliers every day. Frankly, it's serving the entire community." "It's serving your community," I corrected. "Mine didn't ask for cement trucks." She folded her hands and leaned forward. "Let's not make this adversarial. You're a reasonable man. What if the HOA compensated you for easement rights? Say, $50,000. You transfer limited access for community use. We maintain the bridge. You get paid. Everyone wins." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so insulting it came full circle into comedy. $50,000? Lady, I spent twice that just on steel reinforcement, and the bridge was never for sale. Her tone chilled immediately. "Mr. Harper, this is a chance to make peace. Refusing it would be unwise." "Unwise?" I raised an eyebrow. "You threatening me, Karen?" She didn't flinch. "I'm simply pointing out that fighting the HOA is exhausting. We have lawyers, we have influence, and we have patience. This could all disappear quietly, or it could drag on for years." "Then buckle up," I said. "I've got time." She sighed, stood, smoothed her blazer, and dropped a $50 bill on the table. "You'll regret this, Mr. Harper. Growth doesn't stop for one man's nostalgia." When she left, I realized I was gripping my water glass like it was her neck. My pulse was hammering. I sat there for a minute, staring out at the parking lot, wondering if she was bluffing. Spoiler: she wasn't. That same week, trucks started coming even earlier. Some nights they ran lights across the bridge at 2 in the morning. The sound of concrete mixers churning echoed through the valley like a mechanical heartbeat. Then came the flyers, cheaply printed notices posted on my gate saying, "Community Access Road, do not block." I called the county road department. They confirmed what I already knew. The bridge wasn't public. The officials sounded annoyed, like they'd already fielded several inquiries from HOA representatives. "They keep insisting it's shared property," one clerk told me. "They even submitted new documentation, but it doesn't check out. Someone's trying to play paperwork games." A few days later, I noticed something else. My business website had been flooded with one-star reviews, dozens of them all within hours. Comments like, "Unsafe contractor," "Belligerent owner," "Harasses neighbors." My engineering firm relied on reputation. I'd never had a single complaint before. Now my Google profile looked radioactive. I called one of my longtime clients, a construction company that had worked with me for years, and asked what was going on. The owner hesitated, then said, "Look, Jackson, someone's been calling around. A woman. Says she's with a local association. Told us you're under investigation for unsafe practices." "Did she give a name?" He paused. "Karen Whitfield." I felt the blood drain from my face. By the end of the month, 2 contracts were postponed indefinitely. I wasn't officially blacklisted, but the writing was on the wall. Karen was poisoning my livelihood one phone call at a time. I considered suing for defamation, but the problem was proving it. Everything she said was wrapped in polite, deniable phrasing. One evening I stood on the bank of the Little Fox, watching another convoy cross my bridge. The headlights cut through the fog like an accusation. Each truck's weight sent vibrations through the timbers I'd bolted with my own hands. I thought about the decades my family had kept this land standing, through floods and winters and bureaucrats. Now some HOA president was trying to crush me with paperwork and gossip. I clenched my fists, listening to the metal creak under the trucks. For the first time in my life, I felt the bridge groaning. Not from the weight of machinery, but from the weight of rage. Something had to give, and it wasn't going to be me. By the second week of March, I knew something was off the moment I opened my mailbox. Mixed in with the usual bills and lawn care flyers was a thick manila envelope. No return address, just a county seal and a bar-coded sticker. I took it inside and slid it open with a steak knife. Inside were several printed pages, a formal notice of temporary infrastructure integration, a plat map, and a cover letter informing me that Bridge, also known locally as Harper Bridge, had been provisionally added to the Greater Fox River Community Access Network as a shared transit structure. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I read the date on the map. It was updated last week. According to this map, my bridge, the one my great-grandfather built with his bare hands and that I rebuilt with thousands of my own dollars, was now listed as community infrastructure. Just like that, some paper pusher in the zoning department had either been bribed, bullied, or bamboozled, and I had proof of none of it. I called the county planning office. After waiting on hold for 40 minutes and being transferred twice, I got a very confused clerk named Marnie. When I gave her the document number, she went silent for a moment. Then, "Mr. Harper, it looks like..." "Yes, this map was updated. The bridge is listed as a shared structure now." "How? Who authorized that?" She hesitated. "It says here the request came from the Fox River Community Development Committee, accompanied by a supplemental parcel amendment." "Who signed off on it?" Director Taylor's name is on it, but..." "Well, Mr. Harper, this doesn't match the previous records. Do you want to file an appeal?" "Damn right I do." The next day, I drove down to the records office myself. I brought every document I had: my deed, my renovation permits, the original surveys, even the old sepia photo of my grandfather hammering bolts into the original frame. I spent the entire afternoon cross-referencing files, pestering interns, and double-checking microfiche records like I was a conspiracy theorist on a Red Bull binge. That's when I met Glenn. Glenn was a retired surveyor volunteering in the archives for fun, a 70-something human filing cabinet with better memory than most computers. I showed him the new plat map. He frowned. "No way this is right," he muttered. "I remember this bridge, Harper's Bridge, private since forever. I surveyed this tract in '79 after the big flood. Nobody but your family's ever touched it. Can you swear to that in writing?" He scratched his chin. "Hell yes, I can." I had Glenn draft a signed affidavit and made 6 copies before I left. I also scanned it, uploaded it to 3 different clouds, and emailed it to my lawyer before I even got home. But HOA wasn't just attacking from one side. That same week, one of my long-term commercial clients, big concrete outfit out of Bozeman, called and quietly told me they were going to pause their pending project with me. No official reason, just concerns over ongoing controversy. I'd heard that line twice already. The smear campaign was working. Karen hadn't just trespassed over my bridge. She was slowly eroding the ground under my entire business. I was staring at my office wall that evening, wondering how the hell to fight back, when I noticed something I hadn't paid much attention to before. A dusty old box labeled 2013 Rebuild Files. I opened it, and inside were the photos from when I'd rebuilt the bridge. Permits, structural diagrams, receipts, invoices, soil comp tests, the full damn engineering chain. But more importantly, tucked into the back was a certified letter from the state inspector who had signed off on the bridge after the rebuild. His language was very clear. The structure meets private use standards for up to 5-ton loads, not approved for public commercial traffic. That was the smoking gun. I scanned the letter, circled the weight limit, and sent it to my attorney. We agreed to draft a cease and desist attached with a formal notice of liability. It warned HOA that any further damage to the bridge or surrounding land would result in claims for trespass, damages, and reckless endangerment. It also stated in bold font that the bridge was not rated for the weight of their cement trucks, and that they had now been officially informed of that fact. That was key, because if something happened to the trucks now, it wouldn't just be an accident, it would be negligence. I had hoped that warning would slow them down. It didn't. 2 days later, the convoy returned. This time, 3 massive mixers and a heavy-duty flatbed stacked with steel supports. The bridge groaned like a dying animal as they crossed. That night, I sat in my living room, Grover at my feet, as I looked at the structural diagrams and the photos of the cracks I'd taken from underneath the bridge. I thought about the affidavits, the lawyer letters, the doctored county maps, and Karen's smug little face at O'Malley's. It hit me then. Words weren't going to stop this. They'd ignored warnings. They'd falsified records. They'd sabotaged my name. And now they were going to pay. I spent that night not sleeping but planning. The HOA had ignored my signs, my cease and desist, the county records, the load ratings, the law, and basic decency. They thought they were untouchable. They thought they could roll over me the same way their trucks rolled over my bridge. So I decided it was time they hit something that rolled back. The next morning, I drove 2 towns over to a little farm supply store that didn't ask a lot of questions and stocked everything from deer deterrents to old-fashioned caltrops. I didn't buy the actual World War II-style ones. Too obvious. Instead, I got my hands on a box of custom-forged pasture spike mats, the kind you bury under loose gravel to keep wild boars from digging under fences. Legal to own, and very nasty if you drive over them, especially with a multi-ton payload. Back home, I waited until dusk. Then I walked out to the bridge with a headlamp, a shovel, and a box of gloves. I laid down 10 spike mats in a staggered pattern just beneath the surface of the wooden planks, positioned right where the front tires of a heavy truck would hit first. I didn't cover the whole span, just enough to make a statement. Then I set up my trail cams, 2 under the bridge, 1 on each side, and a drone rig with motion activation. Redundant coverage. I wasn't about to let them claim accidental sabotage. Last step. I texted my buddy Jake, who worked night dispatch for county EMS. I told him, might be some dumbasses getting stuck near Little Fox Bridge. No humans will be hurt. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Jake texted back, you got it. We'll be on standby. I want footage. At sunrise, I poured myself a black coffee, put Grover in the truck, and parked at the ridge above the bridge. It gave me a perfect view. Around 7:30, the convoy rolled in. 2 concrete mixers, a crane truck, and a pickup with a clipboard guy riding shotgun. They didn't even slow down. The first mixer made it across, barely, but the second. The moment it hit the spike mats, I heard the hiss of ruptured tires like a giant snake letting out its last breath. The driver slammed the brakes and the weight shifted just wrong. The truck tilted, the edge of the bridge groaned, and the back end skidded sideways. Then it rolled. In slow motion, that bastard tipped like a drunken elephant and crashed straight into the river below with a gut-wrenching splash. The third truck slammed on its brakes too late, skidded sideways, and blocked the bridge completely. The pickup driver got out, screaming into his phone, while the concrete guy was climbing out the window like he'd just been born again. I waited exactly 60 seconds before I dialed 911. Yeah, this is Jackson Harper. There's been an accident on my private bridge over Little Fox. No one's hurt, but you'll need rescue services to fish a mixer out of the river. Be advised, they were trespassing on posted private property. I stayed at the ridge, filming the whole mess from the drone cam while sipping my coffee. Within minutes, flashing lights appeared from both ends of the river. EMS arrived, then the sheriff's department, then, of course, Karen. She showed up in her SUV, hair already perfectly curled, dressed like she was going to a PTA lawsuit fundraiser. She stomped out of the car like she owned the road, which, funny enough, she absolutely didn't. "What did you do?" she shouted at me across the bank. "You could have killed someone." I calmly pointed at the signs on both ends of the bridge. Private property. Do not enter. Not rated for heavy vehicles. Been up for weeks, I said. This is the first time they actually read them, after they crashed. You sabotaged that bridge. Actually, I replied, pulling out my phone. I just installed wildlife deterrents, perfectly legal. The bridge isn't rated for your damn convoys. You were informed in writing. The sheriff came over, took my statement, and reviewed the footage. I gave him a USB stick with time-stamped drone footage, camera logs, and copies of all previous notices. He looked impressed. Karen, meanwhile, was losing her mind. She tried to convince the sheriff that the bridge was public access, that I was endangering the community, that I had set a trap. The sheriff raised an eyebrow and said, "Ma'am, you've got a problem. He notified you in writing about the load limits. You ignored it. Your people trespassed. You're lucky no one was hurt. I suggest you stop talking before this becomes criminal negligence." Karen's face turned the color of uncooked chicken. She stormed off toward the EMS truck like she was going to personally scold the paramedics. The mixer was eventually hauled out by a tow crane 4 hours later. The truck was totaled, concrete hardened in the drum. The driver was fine, physically. HOA's construction timeline? Not so much. That night I uploaded a short video, 3 minutes, no commentary. Just clean footage of the trucks ignoring signs, driving onto my bridge, the crash, and my call to 911. Titled it, "What Happens When You Ignore Private Property Warnings." It went viral in less than a day. The comments were glorious. "That's not sabotage, that's karma." My man's got more receipts than a Walgreens. HOA, harass others aggressively. Karen went silent for 48 hours. Then her lawyers called mine, and the war moved to court. The week after the trucks went splashing into the Little Fox, my life looked less like a quiet rural existence and more like a cross between a courtroom drama and a badly written reality TV show. Reporters showed up at my gate before dawn with microphones and earnest faces. My inbox filled with interview requests, sympathetic notes from strangers who loved the idea of a man defending his land, and predictably hate mail from people who thought I'd set out to murder a cement driver for sport. I answered only the calm requests and let my lawyer, Sandra, handle the rest. She had a way of making complicated legal sentences sound like a sermon. Sober, inevitable, and a little intimidating. HOA did what they always do when a problem looks bad. They sued. Their complaint named me for reckless endangerment, intentional property damage, and entrapment. They painted themselves as injured civic servants trying so hard to build a community, thwarted by a stubborn landowner. Their lawyers dressed their filings in empathy and obligation. They even tried to tack on a claim suggesting I had conspired with the contractors to stage the accident for publicity. Absurd, but a maneuver I expected. I answered with a stack of counterclaims that took up an entire conference room table. Trespass, willful destruction of private property, defamation for the smear campaign against my business, falsification of official documents, and negligence for sending heavy vehicles over a structure they knew, by certified inspector letter, not to be rated for such loads. Sandra filed an emergency motion for discovery and demanded every scrap of paper the HOA used to justify their asserted rights to the bridge. Discovery was a blood sport. They produced reams of electronic correspondence, minutes of meetings, vendor invoices, and an astonishing number of convenience store coffee receipts. We subpoenaed the county's records in a mountain of internal HOA emails. The more the HOA tried to make their case with glossy press releases, the more dirt started to show up. The press smelled it like vultures. One of the discovery gems came from a deposition of a junior HOA board member, a man named Carlos who'd signed a few of the administrative requests. He looked like he wished he'd chosen a less dramatic career. Under oath, he admitted that several official documents had been drafted by an outside consultant hired by the HOA and that he had signed them without thoroughly reading the attachments. He didn't volunteer how those documents ended up in county files. That detail would come later. The biggest break came from a person I didn't even know I had on my side, a former HOA administrative coordinator named Meredith. She contacted Sandra with a voicemail that sounded like someone about to vomit the truth. Meredith was hush-hush at first. She feared retaliation, but she also feared perjury and fraud more. She agreed to meet in a coffee shop with blurred glass and a nervous grip. Meredith handed over an envelope that smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. Inside were printed drafts of the Platt amendments and scanned pages marked with obvious clumsy edits, plus a series of emails between Karen and a county clerk's assistant. In one particularly damning exchange, Karen asked the clerk to expedite the amendment and suggested that a certain signature could be attached later. The clerk replied with an apologetic, "I'll try, but we need a formal request." Meredith's hands shook as she explained how pressure and political favors had moved the paperwork through channels it shouldn't have. She also produced a spreadsheet of calls made to local contractors and inspectors. Calls that matched exactly the week our trucks began to show up. We fed Meredith's materials to Sandra, and she built them into the case like a meticulous mason laying brick. We deposed the county director whose name had been stamped on the altered plat. He testified that the signature block was not his handwriting and that he had no recollection of authorizing any such change. Forensics on the scanned documents revealed inconsistencies in metadata that showed edits and uploads on dates that predated supposed approvals. It looked less like bureaucratic incompetence and more like a clumsy construction of appearance. On the stand, I sat across from Karen, who had managed to look both exhausted and theatrical. She testified about community needs, developer pressures, and how the board had been acting in what she believed was the neighborhood's best interest. Her answers were polished, until Sandra played the Meredith voicemail and the email thread. Karen's face tightened with each printed line. The room felt like a guillotine's shadow. We also called an expert structural engineer, a clean-cut professor from the state university who had reviewed the bridge's original plans and the inspector's letter confirming the weight rating. He walked the jury through load calculations in a way that made sense to farmers and accountants alike. How repeated overloads create microfractures, how fatigue accumulates, and how the timber and steel interactions on our bridge were not designed for daily multi-ton commercial use. He explained that when the concrete mixer tipped, it was not a fluke. It was the predictable failure of a private structure forced beyond its design load. Another crucial testimony came from the driver of the crushed mixer. He was a plain-spoken man who said he had been told by a foreman to use the shortcut because the company had been assured by HOA reps that it was a permitted route. He described the signs and how they had been painted over, and how the foreman said they had legal assurances. That testimony turned a few heads. By the time closing arguments came, the courtroom felt crowded with every small indignity I'd endured. Forged paperwork, phone calls to my clients, the spray-painted signs, the early morning convoys, and Karen's fake civility at O'Malley's. Sandra didn't thump the Bible of property law. She laid evidence on the table like a map of someone's lies, document after document, witness after witness. Her final words to the jury were simple. A private man's heritage was not a public conduit because someone with influence repeatedly decided it would be convenient. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found in my favor on every major count. The HOA was held liable for trespassing, negligent infliction of economic harm, and falsification of public records. The jury awarded compensatory damages for the destroyed truck, the delayed contracts, and the repair costs to the bridge. They also awarded punitive damages given the intentional nature of the HOA's actions. The final judgment number, $3,120,000, sounded unreal when the clerk read it aloud. Sandra touched my shoulder and gave me a look that said, "We did it." But her face also contained the practical stiffness of someone who knows the next steps: collection, enforcement, appeals. Karen slumped into her chair, and for the first time in months she did not have a rehearsed line. Her lawyers immediately filed notices of appeal and threatened countersuits, but for that moment, as cameras clicked and reporters scribbled, it felt like a scale had been balanced. My business reputation slowly started to mend as local coverage shifted from bridge owner versus HOA to HOA angered the county lost big. Contractors called back cautiously at first, then with the warmer tone they had used for years. No one was dancing, no one was gleeful. A lot of people were exhausted. My bridge still had a scar where the mixer had gouged the railings, and there was a long list of repairs to do, but the legal record now bore my name and the truth. For the first time in months, I slept a full night without dreaming of spinning tires and breaking timber. I thought winning in court would be the end of it. You'd think after losing $3 million, a respectable HOA would crawl off into a corner, lick its wounds, maybe hold a few emergency board meetings with shaky coffee mugs and tighter budgets. But I forgot the first rule of dealing with people like Karen Whitfield. They don't lose, not in their own minds. A week after the verdict, I was halfway through rebuilding the busted railing on the bridge when I noticed a plain white envelope taped to my front gate. No postage, no return address, just a red county seal stamped in the corner. I opened it on the porch with Grover chewing his way through a pine cone next to me. Notice of Public Safety Assessment. Structural Hazard Identification. Effective immediately, the enclosed inspection has determined that the bridge known as Harper Bridge is considered structurally compromised and must be closed to all vehicle and pedestrian traffic pending review by county engineering and public works personnel. There was a signature at the bottom. A Mr. Donald E. Clifford, County Infrastructure Compliance Officer. I'd been in engineering for over 20 years. I'd worked with every inspector within a 100-mile radius. I'd never heard of a Donald Clifford. At first I thought maybe it was real. Some Sour Grapes County bureaucrat retaliating on Karen's behalf. But something felt off. The letterhead was slightly misaligned. The font wasn't county standard. The print quality screamed home laser printer with a dying cartridge. And the phrase pending review by public works personnel was delightfully vague. I called the county office. No Donald Clifford on file. No inspection had been scheduled. No structural assessment conducted. In fact, the bridge didn't even fall under their current jurisdiction due to its private status, something that had been confirmed in court less than 2 weeks ago. It was a fake. Karen's last stand wasn't a lawsuit. It was a paper grenade lobbed over my gate, one final attempt to bully me with a badge that didn't exist. I didn't get mad. Not anymore. I'd gone past mad weeks ago. Now I just got even. This time I set the trap myself. First I called my cousin Blake, who happened to run a private investigations firm out of Billings. Blake had a license, surveillance gear, and a particular joy for catching people in the act of being stupid. We set a decoy inspection. I posted a public sign on the bridge saying, "Re-inspection scheduled for Friday at 10 a.m. Compliance officer meeting in progress. Access restricted." Then I waited. On Friday morning, I parked my truck out of view and hid a camera rig in the tree line across the bridge. Blake sat in a borrowed county maintenance truck with a real working dash cam and an official-looking vest. Nothing forged, just convincingly nondescript. At 9:57 a.m., an SUV pulled up. Out stepped a man in khakis and a windbreaker. Clipboard in hand. Hat with a county emblem that looked like it had been ironed on by a drunk raccoon. "Donald E. Clifford," he said, flashing a laminated badge that wouldn't have fooled a mall cop. "Here to follow up on a hazard report." Blake, already recording, nodded. "You got ID?" The man hesitated. Blake pressed again. "Need to verify. County protocol." That was when I stepped out from behind the brush with a sheriff's deputy I'd invited along for the ride. "Funny," I said, holding up the fake inspection notice. "Because according to the real county office, you don't exist." "Sir, I think this is a misunderstanding." "Oh, I think we're well past that." The deputy asked for the man's license. Turned out he wasn't Donald Clifford. His name was Scott Whitfield, Karen's brother-in-law, former contractor, suspended license in 2 states, and now caught impersonating a government official on camera in front of law enforcement during a fraudulent inspection. The deputy cuffed him on the spot. I didn't even smile. Okay, maybe I smiled a little. Later that evening, Sandra called with news. The sheriff's office had launched a formal investigation into Karen for conspiracy and document forgery. Meredith's previous evidence combined with this stunt painted a clear picture of intent. Karen was brought in for questioning the next day. She came in with her usual hairdo and pearl necklace, left with a court summons and a lawyer who looked like he wanted to drown himself in a briefcase. By the end of the month, the HOA board had called an emergency vote. Karen was removed as president by a landslide. They tried to spin it, of course. Claimed she was stepping down to focus on family matters. But everyone knew. The newsletter that month didn't even bother with euphemisms. The phrase legal embarrassment made it in twice. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't celebrating. But when I walked across the bridge that night, newly repaired, lit by solar lamps I installed myself, I couldn't help but run my hand along the wooden railing and think, they really tried everything. Paperwork, lies, sabotage, smear campaigns, fake inspections, all of it. And they still lost. 1 year later, the bridge was better than ever. I'd reinforced the timber joists, replaced the outer steel brackets with double galvanized custom plates, and even installed a small motion-activated light system. Nothing fancy, just enough to deter raccoons and curious teenagers. I added 2 more cameras, one on each end, hidden in decorative lanterns. Not because I expected trouble anymore, but because I'd learned the hard way. Peace without evidence is just an invitation to get steamrolled. The HOA, gone. Dissolved quietly 6 months after Karen's legal circus collapsed. The remaining board members scattered like confetti in a wind tunnel. Some resigned, others tried to salvage the neighborhood's image by forming a resident improvement council, which was basically a book club with delusions of authority. Nobody wanted to touch a governing body after the media coverage. HOA Gate, one paper had called it. Karen herself took a plea deal. 2 years probation, a hefty fine, and a ban from holding any official title in a housing development ever again. Last I heard, she was renting a condo in a gated community 3 counties over, trying to convince the local board to let her install a second mailbox for aesthetics. I sometimes imagined the board president there had no idea what sort of Category 5 Karen had moved in. The $3 million the court awarded me. I wasn't expecting to collect the full amount, and I didn't. But after the HOA's insurance dried up and the board tried to dodge further litigation, a settlement was reached. I ended up with just over $2.3 million after fees and legal costs. Not bad for a bridge nobody wanted to recognize a year ago. I didn't spend it on boats or vacation homes. I rebuilt my workshop, invested in a drone survey startup, donated a slice to a nonprofit that helps rural homeowners fight predatory HOAs. There's more of them than you think. And I finally took a breath without looking over my shoulder. The best part? People stopped treating me like the crazy guy yelling about property lines. They saw the footage. They saw the evidence. Even the folks who called me reckless at first started dropping by to shake my hand. You stood your ground, they said. Most people just give up. One guy even brought me a fruit basket with a note, for the man who popped the HOA's tires. So yeah, things got quiet, but I didn't forget. That's why, one perfect September evening, I decided to host a little gathering. Nothing big, just a dozen or so neighbors and old friends. We grilled by the river, drank beer from bottles with peeling labels, and let the kids run wild while a Bluetooth speaker pushed out outlaw country. Someone brought fireworks. Someone else brought apple pie. Grover, now slightly grayer around the muzzle, laid in the grass with a paper crown someone had put on his head. As the sun started to drop behind the trees, I walked the group out onto the bridge. I'd put up a new sign earlier that day. Hand-carved, polished walnut bolted to the entrance. Harper Bridge. Private. Trespassers pay interest. Underneath it, mounted in a small shadow box, was a single twisted spike, one of the pasture spikes from that fateful morning. The kids asked about it. I smiled. That's a reminder, I said, that sometimes the land fights back. The adults laughed. The kids stared, half impressed, half convinced I was a wizard. We stood there as the sky turned purple, the river quiet and slow beneath us, no headlights, no grinding engines. Just the breeze, the crickets, and a hard-earned silence. One of the neighbors raised a toast. To Jackson and his bridge. And I finally allowed myself to raise my bottle and say something I hadn't said in months. Welcome back, I said. to the bridge, to the land, to peace.